It's moments like this that really allow me to acknowledge that organizing is work, getting into organizing as a lifestyle, as something beyond a hobby is work. And there are all kinds of distinctions and frameworks and factors that go into it, especially after seeing a lot of the flack online about No Kings.
Love how excited Americans are about the No Kings protest. There's just like so much genuine enthusiasm and like pride. Like, yes, we came together to protest. What exactly? No one is quite sure, okay? No kings. I think that for the majority of people, that meant no Trump. But to me, from the outside, what that looked like and what I think it probably looked like to a lot of people who are on the outside who are familiar with this reference is the 2 minutes hate in 1984 all across America, that there is a general attitude of frustration. There is this general widespread passion and rage. But unfortunately, a huge portion of that energy and that passion is being hijacked and channeled towards fabricated enemies like Trump, Iran, Russia, some boogeyman somewhere in space. I don't know. Free the American mind. The general average American mind, just like the Zionic mind, is occupied, undoubtedly. I mean, the Zionics had a couple of districts hit by a handful of missiles, and all of a sudden they think they're like Gaza. Democratic administrations in the US have been funding the police for decades, sending them to Israel to train for decades, specifically to train in controlling economically excluded peoples, to train them specifically in how to treat people like insurgency, how to systematically intimidate, detain, and deport people without question. Administration after administration has been funding this for decades. And all of a sudden, Americans are surprised that these cops are now doing what they've been trained to do. But the system isn't the problem. The funding isn't the problem. The consistent silence on genocide isn't the problem. No, the problem is the guy on the screen. Meanwhile, Zionics are confused why nobody feels bad for them when half their population wouldn't mind seeing the entire Palestinian people eradicated. Tell me that all of these don't sound like people with occupied minds. Tell me again, who needs freeing?
I wanted to talk about the different considerations that people can have going to a protest and why it can be fucking bad to go to protests planned by people that have cops there or love cops or love the military or can't talk about abolish ICE. All of these things are real and important. And if a lot of people are leaving a day of protest like No Kings on June 14th, disillusioned or disgruntled or just confused, I hope this video is a resource for you to understand why protests centered around optics can be counterproductive to liberatory processes, why wanting peace and nonviolence and demanding and enforcing that in a space can lead to a cop-like mentality or mode of behavior, and how these things show up and some of the thoughts and considerations we can have around them. I did not attend the No Kings protests, and this is no judgment on anyone that did go. I just had a feeling that it wouldn't be right for me. And so I want to talk through some of the considerations around cop lovers, people that are friendly to police, people that are okay with being adjacent to the state in their organizing work because they believe that will give them a way forward. And before we even get into all of this, you should remember the AUDRE LORDE quote, "The master's tools will not dismantle the master's house." Say it again with me out loud. The master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. And what are part of the master's tools? The fucking cops. I'm gonna go to my Instagram because some of these comments are incredibly wild. Someone said, "Ours was combined with pride. Many of the folks at No Kings were so uncomfortable when my partner tried to get a be gray, do crime chant going. It was good to see so many folks out, but the priority around optics was obnoxious." I saw another TikTok about someone saying that they were at a protest and the No Kings protest was kind of petering out.
I just left the No Kings demonstration in Oklahoma City in front of City Hall, and I just want to say, whoever those two white women are that organized, I don't know if they're the organizers, I'm pretty sure they are. You should both be ashamed of yourselves. The only reason why I'm saying this is because I stuck around after the demonstration had ended, and there's a large group of people still being vocal, still protesting. And she basically got on the megaphone and was going back and forth with the younger people who were protesting. These people look younger than me, and you're going back and forth with them, and you're a grown-ass woman saying they have no affiliation with us. Our event has ended. They know that. They literally, everyone is watching you pack the fuck up and leave. Go home. These people are still sitting here wanting to fucking exercise their First Amendment right, and you're sitting here telling people that they're anarchists. I heard that come out her fucking mouth, where you're talking to the security guard, kiki haha, and like, what the fuck? And then she's gonna say, oh, I'm scared to walk. I'm scared someone's gonna follow me to my car. You stepped out of your fucking house today to come to a protest you organized or had a part in planning, when there's actual people terrified to leave their fucking house because they're being snatched off the fucking streets, ripped away from their fucking families and lives, and you're going back and forth with some young people who want to sit out and continue protesting, and they're anarchists. You're scared to walk to your car. You shouldn't have even left your fucking house to begin with. Like, I'm so tired of white people centering themselves in movements just to continue to perpetuate the same shit that they're quote unquote fighting against. Kevin Stitt always talks about paid fucking actors. Bitch, you're a paid actor, and I clocked it immediately.
You don't like anarchists. You don't like anarchists? You don't like people? You don't like people that dress up in black bloc or call you out on your bullshit or hate the police? But it is so in the handbook of liberalism, of whiteness, of co-optation to do these kinds of things. And I will always say whiteness mimics cop-like behavior. Cops in the carceral system, as far as we know it in the US, has largely been produced out of slave patrols and the need to protect human beings that were property. And how do police operate now, trying to protect or injure human beings that are considered property of the state? If you really think about it that way, we have to be careful. We have to be careful about the kind of events we're going to, especially with fascism on the rise. When people are okay with organizing alongside cops, when people are okay with having cops there at the action, it can tell you a few things. One, that person does not view police or law enforcement inherently as a danger to them. Two, they have a certain kind of politics where they believe a certain kind of behavior can stop the police from messing with or fucking with people around them in that space that might have more to lose. And three, it's a sort of structural tension with the goals of dissent and protest in the first place, because there is the idea of dissent as we need to show up and be visible and show that we care, blah, blah, blah. But a protest is like, nah, we're gonna run this shit back and y'all gonna have some problems. The difference between those two can be night and day, especially when there's cops involved. It can be night and day. And mind you, I've gone to protests where if you walk into the street, the organizers are like, street walker, they'll call you out. I've heard of Democratic National Conventions, the one that happened last year. Organizers of the protest punched someone in the crowd for trying to get rowdy. So you're punching someone and claiming that they're being violent and use violence against them to try and police them. In this game, you choose your own adventure. I present a scenario to you related to the topics in this video, but what will help is that this isn't real life, these aren't real comrades, and the decisions you make now won't factor in and get people locked up like it would in real life. Scenario 1, the agreement. Your group of smaller organizers joins a larger permitted march organized by a liberal coalition. Although you've joined this larger coalition, you don't know that the main organizers agreed to share the full route, speaker lineup, and even their personal phone numbers with the police. The idea? If we work with the cops, they'll leave us alone. On the day of the protest, police quietly monitor, take photos, and note who's leading chants. In this situation, think about what would you do? Would you speak up about sharing information with the police if you learn about this along the planning process? How could giving this information backfire? In most well-known activism spaces, you would never give police names, phone numbers, or plans. This gives them the tools to track, target, and preemptively charge people that are going to be a part of the action, especially if this is an action where people are open or there is a possibility of things getting spicier. 2, you have to plan your safety teams, who are the marshals, medics, legal observers, so you don't rely on police for security. And then 3, it's important when you are joining any organization or coalition, try to establish clear group agreements beforehand. We don't coordinate with cops, we protect each other. being the perfect victim does not fucking mean that we're gonna win. Being the perfect victim does not mean that the alt-right or the racists or the conservatives or the people that voted for Trump are suddenly going to care about immigrants. This section is gonna be called, What's So Bad About Being Peaceful? Take us back in my organizing journey. In 2020, I was living in this city in central Ohio. The protests were popping off. And I remember having a few different crews of people that I trusted to go out to protest with. The first few days of the protests were rowdy. The state's response was really scary. And I think those first few days radicalized a lot of people. As the protest went on for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it became interesting because there were so many protests being planned. And in the beginning, I didn't really know who was planning the protests. I was just kind of showing up. Partway through those weeks, I started going to more protests, and some of them would be earlier in the day. Some of them would be later in the day. Sometimes you show up to a protest and you'd be like, oh, this is in like a suburb. I guess I didn't know I was going to a suburb. And then you go to some protests and it's only community folks talking. You go to other protests and it's like union leaders and people that are running for city council. Very quickly in 2020, after going to protest after protest after protest after protest after protest, I started to get a gauge of the kind of distinctions of how these protests could happen. Sometimes you show up to a protest and it was so decentralized that it was a mess. Sometimes you show up to a protest and they literally didn't know how to organize a march effectively so you could take care for the people in the front, middle, and back, and how to plan a route accordingly. There were other protests where there were obviously counter-protesters and alt-right people, and the organizers didn't know how to fucking do anything, how to give people instructions, how to step in. All of these things can be a danger. The more I started going, the more I kind of started to understand, like, okay, if it's this kind of protest, you want to show up more covered up. If it's this kind of protest, you want to show up and be prepared to intervene or speak up or try to help because these are newer organizers, but they're more tactically aligned. There are so many different considerations. In 2020, things also started kind of to shift because there were a lot of longtime community organizers in my city that were doing important work, training in abolition, trying to develop the skills and resources to get the movement built and to build towards demands and abolition. And then there were like newer people in the organizing scene that were really green, that wanted to plan a lot of protests, that put on a sort of militant bravado. There was one day that these newer folks planned a protest. The march was off. It was like, I was like, if I were planning this, I feel like we'd kind of be marching differently. And it seems like we don't know where we're going. There wasn't water. We marched for like a good 2 hours. And I remember, this is the part that was wild to me and completely sort of disillusioned me in 2020. We ended the march near the State House. And I remember we turned this corner onto the street, and on this street, it was just filled with cops and journalists. And the organizers had us march onto the street to talk to cops and journalists. And the journalists were like, oh, well, there's this movement happening in the city. How do you feel like you can reach towards understanding with a police officer? Here's a police officer. It was literally a photo op. It was literally a photo op. And luckily, this was a protest that was very chill. But I remember seeing all those cops and just literally being confused and I being heated on the way home, talking to my friends. And that's when I learned what counterinsurgency is. Liberalism and whiteness teaches us to either have an intrinsic fear of the state or to view the state as our friend if we act nice enough. And this is where the perfect victim thing really bothers me. There are a variety of things that the No Kings protest did that made people feel like optics mattered more, the media mattered more, the controlling the narrative that these protests are peaceful, that they're pro-military, that they're pro-Americana.
The No Kings protests have already been confirmed to cooperate with the police. They're permitted with the police and they partner with the hands off. And I just urge people to have critical thinking. I'm not saying don't show up to these protests, but, you know, are they really against capitalism, imperialism, and what our government is doing? Because I've seen a lot of these protests, like what they have on their signs. Oh, we would have been at brunch if it was Kamala Harris flying American flags. All they do is care about their Medicare and Social Security. And from what I've seen from the ones locally to us, they're already cooperating with the police and they've already been found to, you know, call the police on people and give the identity of people to police. And in addition, they're asking people to RSVP to their protests. Like, I'm just very suspicious of this, like how, you know, these organizations can get so big so quickly and have websites when normally protests start with grassroots movements with regular people just getting together and chatting with each other, talking on Instagram, and, you know, they have this big website, RSVP now. Why do they need to have your information? So I'm not saying don't support these protests, but, you know, mind you, they haven't really said much about what's happening in Palestine, number one. So that already tells me a lot about what they care about imperialism. And number two, don't give them your information. Don't RSVP, and don't listen to anything that's telling you not to mask up or, you know, not to protect your identity.
I think it's really alarming that we are being asked to RSVP for a protest. I also find it really, really alarming that there are flyers going around asking people to sit down when a protest gets too violent. That is one of the most dangerous things I've ever heard. They are literally going to make people sitting ducks when law enforcement gets aggressive, when things get out of control. I just really hope that people are thinking critically about these protests tomorrow. They're keeping themselves safe. Do not sit down. Do not sit down. If you are sitting down, you cannot quickly get out of a dangerous situation. You can get hit by projectiles. You can get hit by tear gas. You can get trampled by people running. Why would you be on the floor? I think the message around the protest is a good one. I believe in it. I stand with it. I just think that it's interesting that these chapters popped up seemingly overnight and are requesting like information from people when we should not be collecting this type of information for a protest. So if you are protesting tomorrow, please be vigilant. Please be aware of your surroundings, protect your neighbors, take care of yourselves. Just be safe, everyone.
These are things that people that are aligned with the state do. And there are many different levels of being aligned with the state. You can literally be a cop. You can be the wife of a cop. You can be someone that just fucking loves police departments and you go to your police union party. You can be someone who's a liberal that has an intrinsic trust in the state and the police. You can be someone that respects the military and respects the good side of the military. Being against ICE, it's against carcerality. And if you're against carcerality, you have to question the US as a project of imperialism. You have to question our military, the police. And so when there are actions and protests that are speaking out against injustice, but they can't speak to the systemic wrongs, it's usually because the people organizing that shit on some level are benefiting from some level of participation with the state. And participation doesn't mean that you're a Fed or that you're a cop. It just means you might have cop-like behavior. And that is the careful distinction that we're making in this video. We are going to talk about why you shouldn't have cops at protests and why it's detrimental to the movement, because this is very real and it's worth explaining. Policing, especially in the US, was built to protect systems of racial capitalism, not to protect our safety or rights. When we talk to police at protests, we help strengthen an institution that exists to suppress movements for justice, divide communities, and uphold violent systems we are fighting to dismantle. Police use conversations to survey and target movements, even having cops in a space, giving them information about the action, telling them the routes, using them to help you coordinate. All of that allows the cops to be in a space where people that care about liberation and have different kinds of tactical considerations, they're going to be exposed to the police. Every interaction with the police, even what feels like harmless or polite conversation, helps them gather intelligence. This information is used to map relationships, identify organizers, and build cases for repression. Talking to cops feeds the same machinery that has historically spied on, entrapped, and criminalized movements. During COINTELPRO in the 1960s and 70s, law enforcement collected even casual details at protests to dismantle movements like the Black Panther Party and the American Indian Movement. Today, police routinely document protesters' names, affiliations, tactics to fuel state surveillance and databases. We don't collaborate with tools of our oppression. Our strength comes from refusing to fuel their systems of control. Cops aim to divide, co-opt, and neutralize resistance. Cops don't approach protesters to keep the police generally. They approach to fracture solidarity. They may try to separate the so-called good and bad protesters, pit groups against each other, or convince leaders to compromise or stand down. These tactics weaken collective power, blunt the potential of our movements. At Ferguson protests in 2024, police sought out individual protest leaders for back-channel conversations.
Data miners' whole mission is taking the total universe of social media, particularly Twitter, and making it comprehensible and picking out the events that are happening, that are springing up really before they are necessarily public or reported somewhere, and relaying that information to customers. Those customers could be CBS News, or it could be the FBI. And I think the significance really depends on who is getting that information.
The whole separating the good and bad people, cops will try to do this at a protest. They'll start talking to people that are in the crowd and they're like, do you know those people? Or who's the organizers here? Like anytime there's an action and cops are like, who's in charge? Who's blah, blah, blah. They're looking for someone to arrest. They're looking for someone to blame. And any information you feed them, any like, oh, they're not with us, like even simple questions can really map out a false or true narrative in a cop's head. All right, back to activism. What would you do? This is scenario 2, the police approach. During the march mentioned earlier, a smaller group starts chanting more militant slogans and linking arms. F12, down with the state, abolish ICE, etc., etc. Police come up to the Liberal Coalition's lead organizers and say, are they with you? What are they planning? We need to know to keep everyone safe. The organizers feel pressured. Some consider sharing info to avoid problems. In this situation, what would you do? Would you tell police anything about the more militant protesters? How can you keep cops from dividing the group? Typically, in activism spaces, the best practices go like this. You refuse to give information. No names, no plans, no affiliations. Refuse to give information. No names, no plans, no affiliations. Just say, we don't know. We don't have that information, especially if you aren't being detained or arrested. Another best practice is prepare your team. Do role plays before action so people know how to engage with the police and how to exercise their right to remain silent confidently. And also, remember, cops can legally lie and try to create division. Focus on de-escalation within the community, not by involving police. Engaging with police increases harm to the most vulnerable. Talking to cops doesn't just risk yourself. It endangers Black, Indigenous, Brown, migrant, disabled, queer, and trans comrades who are always at risk of violence, arrest, or criminalization. What feels like a harmless chat can help the state target those already in its crosshairs. Example, after the NYC George Floyd protests in 2020, information gathered by police during friendly interactions helped enable hundreds of arrests and selective prosecution of BIPOC organizers. Bottom line is, talking to the police props up systems we fight to dismantle. Abolition means building solidarity, rejecting collaboration with state violence, and keeping our communities safe through collective care. And by saying that we must reject innocence, and I'll end this section by saying we have to reject innocence as the price of safety. We have to reject innocence as the price of safety. As Jackie Wang writes in Against Innocence, the police state depends on the myths of innocence and guilt to justify its violence. When we talk to cops, we often try to prove we're good protesters, but abolition demands we refuse this trap. Safety shouldn't hinge on innocence. We fight for a world where no one is disposable, no one is criminalized, and no one has to negotiate for their right to exist. We don't talk to cops, not because we have something to hide, but because we have everything to protect. When white people, when progressive people, when liberals ask you to be more innocent in order to get the message across right, it's almost the same as saying that really opposing this is criminal. And we don't want to do that criminal shit. We want to do this other legal shit. And so to conflate dissent with illegibility, to me, is so confusing. Because for some people in this world, dissent and rioting and rage and anger and justifiable rage is some of the most legible things that you can embody, especially as a subjugated person. And I want to read a little bit of something that I've returned to again and again on this channel. If you don't know, you should know. But I'm reading Against Innocence by Jackie Wang. Within this framework, empathy can only be established when a person meets the standards of authentic victimhood and moral purity, which requires Black people, in the words of Frank V. Wilderson, to be shaken free of niggerization. Social, political, cultural, and legal recognition only happens when a person is thoroughly whitewashed, neutralized, and made non-threatening. The spokesperson model of doing activism, isolating specific exemplary cases, also tends to emphasize the individual rather than the collective nature of the injury. Framing oppression in terms of individual actors is a liberal tactic that dismantles collective responses to oppression and diverts attention from the larger picture. That last line is so important. Framing opposition in terms of individual actors is a liberal tactic that dismantles collective responses. So think about it again. LA, the riots there, the Waymo cars burning down, all of the spectacular imagery that has created all of this debate and activated all of this justifiable rage against ICE. Those are individuals acting, but when we understand it as a collective force of emotion, a collective rage, a rage in reaction to ICE literally coming into our communities and kidnapping people, and then people being angry enough to do something. But to turn this into a protest planned by an organization that is tied to the state, funded by the millions of dollars, asking people to put their government information into RSVP forms, it's individualizing the political process. It's saying, you show up and we will tell you how to act in this space, as opposed to showing up to a space and having the interaction with the state be what causes a critical shift in behavior in that space. And I think this also speaks to the shift from collective to individual action. To me, also speaks to the infantilizing nature of some of these spectacles like No Kings. Going on, using Innocence as the foundation to address anti-Black violence as an appeal to the white imaginary. Though these arguments are certainly made by people of color as well. Relying on this framework re-entrenches a logic that criminalizes race and constructs subjects as docile. A liberal politics of recognition can only reproduce a guilt-innocent schematization that fails to grapple with the fact that there is an a priori association of Blackness with guilt, criminality. And mind you, when I'm reading this, we can say Blackness, but let's call it radical. Like, let's say there's a priori association of radicalism with guilt. Then this piece goes on to say, perhaps association is too generous. There is a flat-out conflation of the terms. As Frank B. Wooderson noted in Gromsky's Black Marks, the cop answers to the Black subject's question, why did you shoot me? Follows a tautology. I shot you because you were Black. You were Black because I shot you. In the words of Fanon, the cause is the consequence.
If you spit on us, you're going to the hospital and in jail. If you hit one of us, you're going to the hospital and jail, and most likely get bitten by one of our big, beautiful dogs that we have here. If you throw a brick, a firebomb, or point a gun at one of our deputies, we will be notifying your family where to collect your remains at, because we will kill you graveyard dead. We're not going to play. This has got to stop.
What does it mean for us to demand innocence or to accept that the state can fucking kill you? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, especially when you look at the fact that the state is creating the situation that we are surviving. The state is creating the situation that we are surviving. They're creating the antagonistic force. And somehow they're still able to define what a protest is, to define what legality is, to define what dissent is, what rioting is, what property damage is. Talk to all the fucking college students after a fucking basketball or football game. And so when we look at innocence from this framework, it really becomes important, because a demand or an appeal to innocence is a demand towards the white imagination. It's a demand towards the state. The more you appeal to innocence in organizing in protest spaces, the more funding and legibility in terms of the state's eyes that you can get. The more you turn away from innocence and turns towards more militant tactics, the more you might actually have to rely on community. The more you might actually have to rely on social connections and interpersonal connections and trust and loyalty. How can a super PAC organization like 5501 crop up in cities all around the nation, plan what is considered the largest protests in modern history in a lot of ways? When we say, get rid of the cop in your head, it means don't police others. Cop-like behavior. When people cozy up to the police, it means they might be more likely to sell out parts of the movement to the police or to hand over information to the police. When someone organizes a protest and they promise you that it's going to be peaceful, there are a variety of ways that someone can do that is within the realms of rationality. Hey, we're going to try and make this event as safe as possible. We want to have marshals there. We want to have medics there. We want to have legal observers, families. We want to make sure that you can be in a space that you feel safe. We're going to let people know immediately when there's going to be dispersal orders, and here are these other safety considerations. That, to me, is a much more DIY grassroots way of approaching safety and trying to have a safe action. All right, now we're back for our final round of activism. What would you do? Scenario 3, the aftermath. A few weeks later, those protesters who were more vocal, more visible, especially Black, queer, or previously targeted activists, are facing home visits or surveillance. Word spreads that info handed over during the march helped the state identify them. Coalition is divided and trust is broken. In this situation, what's possible? How do you repair the harm that's been done? and how could things have been prevented? First, you organize a group accountability process. Find a way to clarify and admit mistakes, discuss factually what happened, and commit to no more sharing with the police. 2, build infrastructure. Create legal teams, jail support, rapid response networks to help people combat the repression that they're facing, to help them with any charges that they may be facing because of things that happened at the action, etc., etc. And then 3, educate your coalition, host trainings on security culture and solidarity. Make sure everyone knows that cooperating with the police puts vulnerable people at risk. And really in this situation, I would say, if you get people selling shit out to the police and end up to people charged, blah, 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 there might be some real issues. Those kind of issues. Bam. Yeah, that's the end of this game. Back to the video. Protests that demand nonviolence and want to appear as peaceful to the state intrinsically, they're going to pick the agenda carefully. They're going to pick who can speak. They're going to have certain kinds of messaging or optics. With these kind of protests, if it's run by a super PAC, they have a media team that has dozens and dozens of journalists on media lists. And so the way they're approaching media is pitching a story to a lot of these journalists and publications, ideally, and that story already being partially crafted. They're going to show up and have the journalists speak to the number of people that they aim to speak to. And a part of the nonviolence thing is that since these are organizations that have a bottom line, they do not want unexpected arrests to crop up that they have to spend money on. And so when you really look at some of the ethos or the ethics behind how these organizations or events or spectacles of mass mobilization can happen, that amount of liability tends to turn organizers and organizations like this away from claiming a collective responsibility of the people that show up in the space if or when people go out of line. So if someone's arrested, there's a chance they might not help with legal or bail support. There's a chance that they might say, this wasn't a certain kind of action sanctioned by the folks here. And these are real things that happen. And I really want people to understand that you are at a protest and they're asking you to RSVP and it's like you're dancing and it's a parade. Sometimes joy is resistance. Tell that to fascism. Tell that to the people being kidnapped by the state and detained indefinitely. If we want to have a joyous mood, if we want to celebrate, if we want to show that we're here, you do that by popping the fuck off, whatever that means. You do that by questioning the systems at play. Thank you for watching another video on this channel. If you want to check out more videos in my Direct Action 101 series, check out the playlist in the description. Thank you for anyone that's watched or subscribed lately. I really do this channel as a product of love, as a resource for people, as a way for people to dig in and learn more. I'm not an expert by any means. And these are all educational resources. So find other ways to educate yourself in your community and use this as just one resource. And I'll see you around the corner. If you want to help this channel, consider becoming a Patreon member where you'll get early access to videos and other like built out newsletters that explore a lot of the topics in these videos even more. Consider becoming a channel member. If you want to sign up for something that I support, sign up for Means TV. It's a radical streaming service. You can find my code in the description. If you use the code PRINCE, it gets you a discount. Doing that will also help this channel as well. And I have a bunch of videos on Means TV. See you next time.